Some stories don't end in shouts, they end in silence. In a rooftop, in the weight of a choice made quietly. A man who plans, who builds order out of chaos, and another who holds fast. Loyal, steady, bound by duty. They met in rhythm. In nights spent closer than they ever admitted. But rhythm doesn't always last. Sometimes it breaks. Sometimes it binds one in memory, while the other can't forgive what's been undone. Welcome to Men Being Too Intimate, an audio story series exploring what happens when two men blur the emotional lines between structure and tradition, between control and devotion, between what should last and what couldn't. Tonight's story takes us to Buenos Aires, where an ESTJ, structured, decisive, certain, and an ISTJ, faithful, rigid, unyielding, have to face what closeness really costs. This is Men Being Too Intimate, the rules of the dance. Santiago woke the moment the key scraped the lock. It was always like that. Even half asleep, his body braced for the noise that followed, shoes dropped by the door, the freezer door yawning open, the carton of milk left sweating on the counter. The microwave beeped once, then again, until it fell quiet with its door hanging open. Water ran sharp in the bathroom, then stopped just as suddenly. No more than 5 minutes, but enough to make Santiago's chest tighten. He stayed still, sheets tucked neat around him, but his eyes were open, listening. Relief pressed heavy in his ribs. Luciano was back. Santiago hated how much that mattered, how his night stretched hollow until the sound of his door opening filled it. His smell reached him before Luciano did, the whole night carried in his clothes. Santiago could picture it. The crowded bar, cheap beer dripping from counters, strangers shouting over music that wasn't worth the volume. Luciano didn't belong to order, to timing, to quiet hours. He kept to his own habits, loud, careless, unbothered by anyone else's rules. And those routines always followed him home. The mattress dipped, clothes stripped off in practice sequence, belt buckle clinking, buttons undone, shirt folded once before landing on the chair. Santiago's jaw tightened. He didn't move until a hand pressed at his shoulder, shaking him awake. "Hey, thought I should sleep here tonight before your big show tomorrow." Luciano's voice was low against his ear, not sloppy, not pleading, just expectant, as if this was the natural next step. His breath was warm with liquor, mouth already searching in the dark. Santiago turned, eyes catching what little glow filtered through the curtains. "It's late. Just sleep, babe." Luciano gave a short huff of amusement, brushing his lips against his neck as if the word had no weight. Santiago caught his wrist, pulled him in close, arms closing around him with the same finality he brought to every decision. "Come on, you also have practice in the morning, sleep." It wasn't rejection, at least not in Luciano's eyes. Just Santiago being Santiago, rules, boundaries, always control. Luciano pressed one last kiss, smirked faintly at the firmness in those arms, and shifted free. Within minutes his back was turned, breath already heavy, body slack in the way only exhaustion allowed. Snoring filled the silence. Santiago lay awake, staring into the dark, the scent of smoke and beer still clinging between them. Relief settled in him that Luciano was here at all. But even as he listened to that steady rhythm beside him, the ache lingered. Being home and being with him were never quite the same. Santiago rose earlier than even his discipline demanded. Not 6 on a Saturday, but before 5, the city still hushed outside. He couldn't lie still. The weight of the day pressed too much against his chest. He moved quietly, gathering himself into the routine that steadied him. Coffee first, dark and measured. Eggs simmering, fruit sliced into clean halves. He plated them carefully, arranging one set for himself and another for Luciano, knowing full well it would go untouched, but making it anyway. A note, scrawled in neat letters, waited on the fridge. Eat something before practice. The shower steamed the mirrors, washing away the last of sleep. When he stepped out, towel around his waist, he felt the hum of nerves return. The closet door stayed open too long. He tried on one suit, then another, shifting in front of the mirror, dissatisfied with all of them. Today demanded the right presence. Today wasn't just another Saturday. Behind him the sheets rustled. A low voice, heavy with sleep, drifted across the room. "You're loud for someone who tells me to be quiet." Luciano was half buried in the pillow, hair sticking, eyes slitted but watchful. Santiago didn't turn, only tugged on another jacket. Luciano's gaze lingered, then curved into a faint smirk. Wear that one. You look sexy in that, remember? That's what you wore when we first met. The words stopped him. Santiago hadn't realized he remembered. His chest tightened, but he masked it. He leaned down, pressed a kiss to Luciano's temple. You still have 2 hours before practice. Before pushing him gently back into the pillows. Santiago left him there, Luciano already snoring again. The smell of smoke and liquor still clinging faintly to his skin. The cultural center opened in a hush that quickly filled with voices, heels, and the shuffle of programs. By the time Santiago arrived, the air already carried the faint whine of tuning strings from a quartet rehearsing in the corner. This wasn't a small exhibition. It was the kind he had worked toward for years, ambitious, layered, and unmistakably his. Paintings hung large on the walls, bodies of men pulled into tango postures, one hand raised, one pressing into the small of a back. Sculpture stood between them, bronze and marble figures locked in rhythm, hips forward, legs crossed, shoulders tilted with tension. The air carried the weight of proximity, the pull of two men pressed closer than rules had once allowed. Media projections flickered across another wall. Archival footage, recut and looped, dancers' hands slipping, clasping again, steps faltering then recovering. The sound installation layered bandoneon and footsteps, filling the room with an echo of floorboards and breath. At the center stretched a wooden stage, open, inviting, where anyone bold enough could step forward to dance. Guests moved slowly through it all, murmuring to one another. Some whispered in surprise, some in fascination. For many, it was the first time they had seen the tango framed this way, not as spectacle or seduction, but as something raw, male, and unresolved. Two men had stepped into the circle. Amateurs, perhaps, but earnest. One insisted on the lead, shoulders squared, movements sharp. The other resisted, loose and playful, refusing to be steered. The dance stumbled, collided, but found its way back to rhythm for a moment before breaking again. Santiago's chest tightened as he watched, the metaphor too sharp to ignore. A tango only worked when both agreed on the rules. Without it, there was no dance at all. The afternoon heat shimmered over the pitch, the grass scorched thin in places where cleats had torn it bare. Luciano laced his boots tight, bouncing once on his toes before jogging out, chest still heavy from last night but lungs opening in rhythm. The ball smacked the turf sharp, and the field came alive with shouts in Spanish, whistles and the percussion of running feet. They started with drills, quick passes, one-touch, sprint to the cone and back. Luciano drove himself harder than the rest, cutting corners, demanding another round when the coach moved them on. Sweat burned into his eyes, but he grinned through it, jaw tight, shoulders squared like nothing could touch him. He shouldered a striker off the ball, slipped past a challenge, sent a clean pass wide. Teammates barked his name, and he responded with sharp gestures, orchestrating from instinct. For a while it was perfect, the ball rolling in rhythm with his stride, the sound of breathing and pounding feet sinking like a drum beat. Then came the moment, a breakaway. Ball fed straight to him, the keeper too far forward. He could see it, the net yawning open, the glory already in his chest. He swung, leg cutting through air, the strike hard. Too hard. The ball sailed off center, snapping into the keeper's arms like it belonged there all along. Silence, then the whistle. Match over. Luciano cursed under his breath, fury tight in his ribs. He hated failing when it counted. In the showers, steam filled the air, loud with the slap of towels, the echo of voices bouncing against tile. A teammate leaned into him, shoulder bumping. Careful, hermano. You're running yourself into the ground. I'm fine, Luciano said, scrubbing at his hair, letting the hot water burn away the ache. Another voice chimed in, teasing. So today's the big thing, right? Your boyfriend's, what do we even call it? It's exhibition, Luciano corrected. Not a show. The guys laughed, one tossing his soap at him. Okay, center artista, exhibition. Should we drop by? Another asked, mock serious. What do we bring? Flowers? Wine? Or just you? That drew louder laughter. A hand smacked against Luciano's bare hip. Another pinched at his ass. He shoved the guy away with a grin, rolling his eyes, but the heat in his cheeks wasn't from the steam. Idiotas, he muttered, though his smile betrayed him. He rinsed off quickly, not giving them more to pry at. Later at his apartment, the contrast hit: no shouts, no steam, just silence pressing in. The place wasn't spotless. Shirts over the back of a chair, dishes in the sink. But it was enough. It was lived in, not curated. He straightened a pile of mail, swept a hand across the counter, satisfied. For him, that was clean. He checked the time. Thought of the gallery across town. Then he kicked off his shoes, sprawled across the couch. He told himself just a moment to reset. No alarm, no plan. Sleep swallowed him whole, careless as ever. By late afternoon, the cultural center had swelled with voices. The string quartet played quietly in the corner, but most of the sound came from conversation patrons leaning close over glasses of Malbec. Artists gesturing with sharp hands, students whispering as if they had stumbled into something forbidden. It was only when he spotted a cluster of broad shoulders at the door that his mask slipped. Luciano's teammates. For a heartbeat, hope surged. He excused himself from a patron mid-sentence, weaving through the crowd, pulse quickening. But when he reached them, he saw the truth. No Luciano. Just his friends, sweaty hair still damp from practice, shirts half-tucked like they'd rushed straight from the field. One grinned wide, handed Santiago a bottle of wine with a clap to his shoulder. For the host. Gracias, Santiago said, his smile trained, steady. He tried not to show the way disappointment tugged beneath it. The teammates were already drifting toward the projection room, voices too loud for the hush of the gallery. Santiago followed at a distance, half dreading, half compelled. On the far wall, the media piece played, two men in tango. One dressed in tailored black, crisp lines catching the glow. The other in stages of undress, shirt slipping from his shoulders, trousers unbuttoned, skin revealed in shadow and highlight until nothing remained but movement. Their faces were never shown, only hands, hips, torsos, the unmistakable rhythm of bodies that knew each other. The friends stopped short, eyes widening. Then the first laugh came, sharp and incredulous. Che, boludo, look at that. That's him. A finger jabbed the projection. Which one? Another asked, smirking. The naked one, obviously. Look at the tattoo down by his... He trailed off with a crooked grin. Laughter rippled. One shook his head. Nah, no way. That's way too generous for Luciano. Generous? What, you've been checking him out in the showers? Another shot back, grinning. Shut up, hermano. Don't act like you haven't looked. Yeah, but not long enough to compare. Then why you so sure? Maybe you wanted to believe, eh? The group broke into rowdy chuckles, one covering his face with his hands. God, stop staring. We're in a gallery, for fuck's sake. But none of them looked away, not right away. Their voices dipped, half uncomfortable, half entertained, carrying the same tone they'd use on the pitch. Santiago had built this piece to be art. Intimate, yes, but framed, restrained. Not a punchline. Not a locker room joke. And yet here it was, Luciano reduced to exactly that. One of the friends finally pulled out his phone, grin fading into urgency. I'm calling him. In a darkened apartment across town, the vibration rattled a knitstand. Luciano groaned, face buried in the pillow, hand fumbling blindly before catching the phone. The screen glared back at him. 3:07. On the far side of the gallery, Luciano's friend ducked his head, voice dropping low as he pressed his phone to his ear. You were supposed to be here at 2. It's almost 3. Fuck. He sat up too fast, head spinning. He'd meant to close his eyes just for a minute to shake off the exhaustion of the match, the heat, the shower chatter. Now the sheets clung to his skin, his hair damp with sweat. He pressed the phone to his ear. Shit, I overslept. You think? His friend barked. You better move, cabron. Luciano cursed again, already stumbling toward the bathroom, stripping off his shirt as he went. He splashed water on his face, shoved his hair back, pulled on the sharpest clothes within reach. The kind he knew would pass for deliberate, not rushed. By the time he checked himself once in the mirror, the gallery was already slipping out of reach in his mind. But the image of Santiago there alone, holding it all together, burned too hot to ignore. Back in the gallery, the group of footballers finally gave up their laughter, their jokes tapering into awkward mutters. One clapped Santiago on the shoulder on the way out. Tell him we came. Their departure left a hush behind, the kind that swells once noise drains away. Santiago exhaled slowly, letting the mask of the perfect host slip just for a second. A hand brushed his arm. Santiago turned. Dance? The stranger asked, a glass of Malbec still dangling in his other hand, his smile open, insistent. For a moment, Santiago hesitated. This wasn't the plan, he was the curator, not the performer. But the stage he had built was waiting, and eyes were turning toward them. The polite refusal stuck in his throat. He nodded. They stepped onto the wooden floor. The bandoneon swelled faintly in the soundscape, the stranger's hand finding his, another pressing to his back. Santiago stiffened, then yielded. They moved into rhythm, not flawless, but searching. One step, a pivot, a pause where breath drew too close. It was meant to be symbolic, invitational, and audience reminded that tango belonged to anyone willing. But as the stranger's grip firmed, as their bodies found sync, something charged filled the space. Santiago felt the heat in it, the way eyes began to follow. The intimacy he'd curated as concept was becoming undeniable, lived. And then, from the doorway, another presence. Luciano. Still in the sharp clothes he had thrown on minutes ago, chest heaving from the rush, eyes locked on Santiago. He froze only long enough to take in the scene, the closeness, the hand at Santiago's back, the faint flush on his face. He knew that look. He knew that body when it leaned into desire. And it was enough to split him open. Luciano didn't storm in right away. He stood at the edge, jaw set, fist tight at his sides, watching. Santiago's steps were precise, controlled as always, but there was a flush in his cheeks, a softening in his shoulders. The stranger spun him once, drew him close again, and Santiago didn't pull away. His eyes caught for a moment, lids half lowered, the barest hint of surrender in his face. That was all it took. Luciano's chest burned hot, breath heavy, the memory of their first dance crashing against the sight of this one. The body he loved, the rhythm he thought was theirs on display, shared with someone else, the intimacy of it undeniable. The music swelled. The stranger's hand pressed firmer at Santiago's back. And then Luciano moved. Through the crowd, onto the stage. A hand closing around Santiago's wrist, hard enough to halt the step mid-beat. Gasps rippled through the room, the dance broken, the illusion shattered. Santiago's face drained, caught between shock, shame, and the weight of all those eyes. He tried to steady his voice, but it came clipped, urgent. Luciano, stop. Luciano pull only tightened, dragging Santiago off the stage through the startled crowd. Toward the stairwell that led up to the roof. The door slammed behind them, cutting off the music below. Rooftop air rushed sharp and cool, carrying the hum of Buenos Aires traffic far beneath. Santiago stumbled once, his polished shoes scraping concrete, Luciano's grip still clamped tight around his wrist. Let go. His voice was firm, steady despite the pounding in his chest. Luciano spun, eyes blazing. You think I wouldn't see that? Looking at you like that. It was a dance. Santiago shot back, tugging his arm free. Luciano barked out a laugh, harsh and broken. Don't tell me that look in your eyes was nothing. Santiago's breath hitched. For a moment he had no words, stunned by the accuracy of the accusation. The silence cracked the air between them. Stop, Luciano! His tone sharpened, meant to end it. But Luciano only stepped closer, fists trembling at his sides. Stop? You want me to stop? You put it on a wall for strangers to laugh at. You let him touch you like that in front of everyone. Santiago's jaw tightened, words coming sharp. It was art. Art? Luciano's laugh was bitter now, tearing out of him. You think I care about art? That night, when you filmed us, it wasn't art to me. It was love. Real. His voice broke, then hardened again. Luciano, Santiago began, but the name died on his tongue when Luciano's face twisted, hurt and fury warring. Cheating, Luciano spat. You, with him. He cut himself off, but the words had landed. Santiago's hand lashed out before he knew it, palm cracking across Luciano's cheek. The sound echoed sharp in the night air. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Luciano's fist swung, striking Santiago across the face. His body reeled back, dust clinging to his suit, a hot sting opening on his cheek where blood began to thread. Santiago's breath came sharp, humiliated, chest heaving. Get out, he said coldly. Fine, over with your fucking perversion. You wanted to expose me, parade me, make me a joke to my own friends. He broke off, his eyes catching the thin line of blood sliding down Santiago's cheek. The fire dimmed for a flicker. His voice faltered. Shit. I didn't mean Santi, I didn't. Santiago turned away, shoulders rigid. Luciano stepped forward, desperate now. But Santiago stayed cold, shame burning hotter than the cut on his face. He raised his hand not to strike, but to point at the door. Go. Before I call security. Luciano's chest rose hard, defiance flaring one last time. We're done, so fucking done. He turned and shoved past the guests. Santiago stood alone, blood drying, dust clinging to his suit. The rooftop wind pressed sharp against Santiago's skin, stinging the cut on his cheek. Below, the glow of the exhibition spilled upward. The media wall kept looping. Two men locked in a tango, one clothed, one naked. The light blurred, and the rooftop melted away. 2 years ago, Santiago had stood in the center, watching Luciano kick off his shoes, that careless grin on his face. His own voice had surprised him, steadier than he felt. Dance with me. Luciano raised a brow, smirking, but stepped close. Santiago's hand pressed into his back, the record player spinning a low bandoneon. Their feet began to move, tentative at first, then sharper, closer, until the silence between steps was thick with heat. When their eyes locked, something shifted. Santiago felt the undoing in his chest, the permission he hadn't dared ask for. He whispered, almost shy, "Can I film it?" Luciano gave a crooked grin, eyebrow raised. What? Santiago laughed too quick, covering the pound of his pulse. It's art. Luciano shook his head, amused but indulgent, pulling him back into step. For him, it was just love, simple as that, bodies moving in rhythm, a closeness he didn't question, a wanting that didn't need explanation. He wasn't the kind to overthink. He didn't call it art or meaning or history. For him, it was two men pressed close in a living room, the world shut outside, knowing with certainty that this was real. For Santiago, it was love too, but layered. It was creation, it was expression. It was the moment he had been waiting for without knowing it. He felt it not only in his chest, but in his mind, in his fingertips itching for permanence. He wanted to hold it, capture it, make it last beyond the fleeting minutes of music. Luciano's smile lingered as they moved, but his gaze was steady, searching, almost questioning, like he was asking without words. The music carried them. The record skipped once, caught and kept spinning. Their bodies pressed tighter, steps tangling until movement gave way to stillness. They laughed into each other's shoulders, breath hot, sweat dampening shirts. And when the laughter faded, their mouths hovered close enough that the air itself felt charged. The camera sat on the table, forgotten, the little red light still blinking. But what it didn't catch was what mattered most. The pause, the weight of the look, the sound of their breaths threading together. The moment when love stopped being something implied and became something undeniable. That night became their secret, their proof. Now it was projected in cold light, stripped of privacy, endlessly repeating for strangers who could never understand. The loop still playing below, strangers watching without knowing. Their love immortalized not as memory, but as exhibition. And Santiago stood hollow, the echo of his own words burning back at him. It's art. ESTJ and ISTJ, one who builds love into structure, hoping it will last forever, and one who guards love as memory, sacred because it was theirs alone. Together they found rhythm. But rhythm breaks, when rules collide with silence, when one reaches for permanence, and the other holds too tightly to the past. That's what happens when men are too intimate. When a dance says more than words ever should. This was Santiago and Luciano. A story of order and loyalty, of closeness made art, and of love that could not survive the gallery lights.
Men being too intimate.